They sat me by the kitchen, again. Not that I was expecting a red carpet, but when your name's not even on the family place cards, it's a pretty clear sign you don't belong here anymore. But I stayed. I smiled. I listened to them toast each other like royalty, talking about mergers, acquisitions, private jets, while I quietly checked my phone under the table. What they didn't know, their entire empire was one signature away from being mine, and I wasn't even wearing heels. The Langdon Christmas dinner was never really about family. It was a corporate parade with wine pairings and egos dressed in designer suits. The chandelier sparkled like it knew it was better than everyone in the room. My brother Elliot, CFO of Langdon Holdings, was mid-monologue about quarter-over-quarter revenue stabilisation, like it was poetry. I was seated near the catering staff's swinging door, right between a decorative poinsettia and the wine cooler hum. Classic. "Still freelancing, Tessa?" my mother asked, cutting into her lamb as if her words weren't sharper than her steak knife. I looked up. "Still consulting, yes." Dad chuckled, swirling his bourbon. "There's still an HR spot open if you want something stable. You know, in the real world." Elliot leaned back, grinning. "Unless you're allergic to offices now." Sabrina, my sister-in-law and part-time lifestyle influencer, full-time snob, glanced at my outfit. Black sweater, slacks, clean lines, comfortable. "At least tell me you changed out of pajamas this time," I could have said a lot. About the team I now manage across 3 time zones. About the 7-figure deal I closed from my so-called pajamas. About the penthouse I don't post on social media because I don't need applause to know my worth. But I just smiled. I like to be comfortable. They laughed, loud enough to make the waiter hesitate, loud enough for me to feel 14 again, back when I missed one family meeting and they voted to cut my monthly board stipend for maturity reasons. They never really saw me again after that. "Let's toast," Dad said, lifting his glass high. "To Langdon Holdings, a legacy company run by real business people." Everyone cheered, except me, because I was reading a message that said, "Transfer finalised. Orion now holds 52.4% controlling interest in Langdon Holdings." And just like that, the table I was never invited to now belonged to me. Sometimes the best revenge stories don't start with yelling. They start with silence and end with signatures. And I had waited 3 years for this moment, wearing the same black sweater they just mocked. 3 years ago, I sat across from my family in that same boardroom, before they scrubbed my name from every record that mattered. I had a plan, a vision, a proposal neatly bound, with numbers that made sense and projections that would have made any investor excited. All I needed was 1%, one single percent of my trust shares to leverage into seed capital. I wasn't asking for a handout, just permission to use what was already mine. Elliot didn't even look at the packet I handed him. "Startups fail all the time, Tess," he said, like I hadn't researched it for months. "You're not built for the risk." My father didn't even blink. "Langdons don't gamble, and frankly we can't afford to fund distractions." And my mother? She just sighed and said, "Sweetheart, you've always been more sensitive than business-minded. Maybe you should focus on something simpler, more stable." Simpler, stable. Like their expectations of me. They didn't yell, they didn't slam doors, they just closed their folders and moved on. And somehow that silence hit harder than any screaming ever could. The next week they held a private shareholder meeting without telling me. My voting rights were temporarily suspended for restructuring. Just like that, I was out, quietly erased, no fights, no goodbyes, no one checked in after. And if you've ever been written off by your own family like you're just a mistake they regret mentioning, then you know what I felt walking out of that building. Not anger, not even sadness, just air, like I had never really been in the room to begin with. Funny, isn't it, how people can sit around a table with your blood in their veins and still make you feel like a stranger asking for too much. I ended up cashing out the sliver of shares they couldn't legally freeze, barely enough to fund my first round, but I did it, quietly, alone. There was no one to celebrate with, no one to believe in me, but that silence, I turned it into fuel. I wonder how many people out there have ever felt like this, like the people who were supposed to back you up were the first to turn away. If you're listening to this and your own family ever made you feel small for dreaming bigger, you're not the only one. And maybe you're not crazy for still wanting to prove them wrong. Or maybe, just maybe, you're building something they'll never see coming. I didn't start Orion Ventures to get revenge. Not at first. I started it because I had to. Because once the door closed behind me at Langdon Holdings, I knew no one was opening it again. And I was done knocking. With the small percentage of shares I managed to liquidate, barely enough to buy a new MacBook and cover the first few months of rent, I opened a quiet little office above a bookstore downtown. I used to joke that the smell of used paperbacks helped mask the scent of desperation. There was no launch party, no fancy website, just me, a spreadsheet, and a phone I didn't know if anyone would ever call. But slowly, the calls came. A small logistics firm no one wanted to touch. A renewable packaging company on the verge of collapse. A payment platform run by two overworked founders who hadn't taken a weekend off in 4 years. I didn't just invest in them. I sat with them, rewrote proposals, pitched at 2 a.m. Zoom calls to overseas boards. I helped them rebuild, not just their companies, but their belief in themselves, and one by one, they grew. By the end of year 1, Orion had 5 companies under management. By year 2, 12. And now, we manage assets across 3 continents, with a team of 80 spread globally, many of them women, minorities, people like me who had been written off, people who knew what it was like to be doubted. But the funny part, I never changed my name back. Every contract, every acquisition, every board vote, signed by T.L. Monroe. The family never noticed. They were too busy chasing press mentions and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Too proud to realise that the small firm buying up their supply chain, chipping away at their market footprint, was connected to the daughter they'd stopped inviting to quarterly updates. And then came the irony of all ironies. Last fall, I got a notification from our legal team. A block of Langdon Holdings shares had hit the private market, quietly sold off by a socialite with too many credit cards and not enough cash. My mother. She didn't even know who was buying them, didn't ask. And when the last document was signed, I just stared at the screen. My hands were shaking, because I had just become the second largest private shareholder in the very empire that told me I was unfit to lead. It wasn't just poetic, it was surgical. I had built a company out of their silence. They ignored me. They erased me, and I used that invisibility like armor. I didn't post wins online, didn't chase awards. I just kept going. Because when no one believes in you, and you still keep going, that's where the real power is. And if you've ever felt like your quiet work didn't matter, like success only counts when it's seen, just know this. Some of us were never meant to shine under their spotlight. We built our own. And I was about to turn that light straight back at them. "You sure you're okay sitting at the end again?" the server asked me quietly, half whispering as she set down my plate. I nodded. "Don't worry, I'm used to it." It was the Langdon holiday dinner again. Same long table, same crystal glasses. Same invisible wall between me and the rest of them. Elliot was halfway through bragging about how smart cost-cutting had driven profits up another 8%, while Dad raised his glass to toast the real pillars of Langdon Holdings. I wasn't one of them, not even close. "Cheers to tradition," he said, clinking his glass with Elliot's, "to keeping the business in strong, capable hands." My sister-in-law, Sabrina, chimed in, "And to women who know their place, whether it's behind a successful man or behind a laptop at home." Everyone laughed. I took a sip of water, but inside, I felt the slow fire I'd carried for 3 years flicker just a little brighter. Another message buzzed under the table. "Transfer complete. Orion now holds 52.4%, full controlling interest confirmed." I looked up, catching Elliot's smug expression as he scrolled through stock alerts on his phone. He had no idea the price drop he was about to see was because of me. I cleared my throat softly. "I think I'll attend the board meeting next week," I said. The table froze. "You? Elliot said with a half-laugh. "You haven't stepped foot in the building in years." Dad squinted. "You're not even a shareholder anymore." I pulled out my tablet and tapped the screen. "I think this will clear that up." Their eyes landed on the first slide. Orion Ventures. Statement of acquisition. Elliot leaned in, face suddenly pale. "This is a joke." "No," I said. "This is real. Orion owns controlling interest now, and Orion is mine." Sabrina dropped her fork. "You're T.L. Monroe?" Dad whispered. I nodded. "You always told me not to use the Langdon name if I wasn't going to make the family proud. So, I didn't." Silence fell so thick you could hear the wind outside. "You bought us out," Elliot said, stunned. "I gave you a chance 3 years ago," I replied. "I asked for 1%. You all laughed. You cut me out. So I built something better." It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But in that moment, sitting at the far end of the table, still in the same black sweater they'd mocked, I saw every one of their faces crack. I wasn't angry. I was just done asking to be seen. And now? They'd have no choice but to look. Sometimes I wonder about how many of us have sat at tables like that, watching people toast their own importance, never once seeing you across from them. If you've ever felt invisible in a room full of people who share your last name, yeah, I felt that too. The next morning, I walked into Langdon Holdings for the first time in 3 years. Funny thing is, nothing had changed. Same glass doors, same marble lobby, same security guard at the front who used to wave me through back when I was the promising daughter. Now he squinted. "Miss?" I handed him my new ID. "T.L. Monroe, here for the executive board meeting." His eyes widened. "You're—" "Oh, yes, Mom." I stepped into the elevator alone. My reflection in the mirrored walls didn't look like revenge. No red lipstick, no power suit, just my usual, black sweater, calm face, a pair of worn-in flats. The elevator dinged on the top floor, executive level. The whispering started before I even turned the corner. Assistants glancing up, department heads pretending to look busy. Everyone had heard the news. No one expected it to be me. Inside the boardroom, the energy was frantic. Elliot was pacing. Sabrina was furiously scrolling through her phone, probably trying to calculate if her stock options were still worth anything. My father sat at the head of the table, posture stiff, like he still believed the seat gave him power. "Good morning," I said, taking the seat to his left. Elliot looked up, startled. "That's the CEO's seat." I nodded. "Exactly." Dad's jaw tightened. "Tessa, we need to discuss this." "We will," I said calmly, opening my laptop. "Let's start with the new agenda." The screen lit up with the first slide. Langdon Holdings, Restructure and Modernization Plan. I continued, voice steady. "First, we'll be implementing full executive audits, performance-based reviews, contribution evaluations, and efficiency scores. Promotions will no longer be determined by bloodline," Sabrina gasped. "You can't do that." "I can," I replied, "and I am." "Second, all executive perks are suspended pending review, including spa retreats, company cards for non-business expenses, and," I looked at her directly, "fashion allowances." She blinked like I'd slapped her. "Third, we'll offer remote work flexibility for all eligible employees, effective immediately. Productivity speaks louder than appearances." My father finally spoke. "This isn't how we do business, Tessa." "No," I agreed. "It's not how you did business. It's how the world works now. You just didn't notice because no one challenged you." Elliot stood up, pointing. "This isn't fair. I'm the CFO." "For now," I replied, tapping my keyboard. "But shadow performance metrics don't lie. If you want to keep the title, earn it." The room went quiet. I didn't yell, I didn't gloat. I just sat where no one thought I'd belong and made the rules they never let me write. Ever wonder what it feels like to walk back into a place that once pushed you out and not just take a seat, but take the whole table? It doesn't feel like victory, it feels like clarity. like finally hearing your own voice in a room where it was never welcome. After the boardroom fell silent, after the restructure plan was on record, after I closed my laptop and told them the meeting was adjourned, no one moved. Elliot sat frozen, gripping the arms of his chair like the title CFO might slip away if he let go. Sabrina just blinked, her perfectly done lashes trembling as the realization hit. She no longer had protection under a shared last name. And my father, Richard Langdon, the man who used to run this place like a monarchy, stared down at the table as if it no longer recognized him. I stood, straightened my sleeves, gathered my things. "Wait," Dad said, voice hoarse. "Tessa, can we talk?" I turned to him. "Now you want to?" He flinched. We didn't know." "You didn't ask." He opened his mouth, closed it again. Mum appeared moments later like she always did, just a little too late to do anything meaningful. She looked small, unsure of whether to play the guilt card or the socialite mask. "Sweetheart, why didn't you tell us?" "I did. You just weren't listening," I said softly. "You disappeared," she whispered. "No, I was erased." They didn't know what to say, and I didn't owe them words anymore. As I stepped into the elevator, I caught my reflection again, same black sweater, same quiet eyes. But something had shifted. There was weight behind my presence now. I wasn't waiting to be accepted. I had built something stronger than their approval ever was. My phone buzzed as the elevator doors closed. Shadowmetrics uploaded. 2 new acquisitions approved. Langdon Holdings stock up 31%. You did it, TL. Board's full support is behind you. I smiled. By the time I got home, the sun had dipped just below the skyline. I kicked off my shoes, threw my sweater over the couch, and dropped onto the floor next to my laptop, just like I used to, 3 years ago. Same position, same city, completely different power. I opened the file for tomorrow's all-hands meeting. This time, I wasn't just walking back into Langdon Holdings. I was rewriting what it stood for. No more gatekeeping, no more legacy titles, no more promotions handed out over dinner to the loudest voice at the table. If you could do the work, you belonged. If you showed up day after day when no one saw you, you mattered. Because I remembered what it felt like to ask for just 1% and be told I was dreaming too big. And now I didn't take 1%. I took everything they said I couldn't handle. And I built it better, from scratch, in my name, in my way. To anyone out there who's ever asked for something small, just a chance, a vote of confidence, a piece of respect, and been denied, overlooked, or outright pushed aside, yeah, I've been there too. So tell me, have you ever been told you weren't built for something, only to prove them wrong in silence? Drop a key if you're still building, or leave a comment if this one hit close to home. And hey, if you're new here, maybe stick around, because the truth is, not all revenge stories are loud. Some, they're quiet, strategic, patient, and absolutely unforgettable.